1 to 2% of customers, and this is for the average dispensary, drive 15 to 20% of your revenue. Think about that.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of The Dime. I'm Brian Fields. With me, as always, is Kellen Finney. And this week, we got a very special guest, Chris Violas, CEO at Blaze. Chris, thanks for taking time. How are you doing today?
I am doing great. It is, Green Wednesday. It's exciting. And thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I've been listening to this for quite some time, so I'm really excited we got the invite to join today.
Stoked to have you here. Kellen, how are you doing?
Doing really well. Really excited to talk to Chris. Really excited the West Coast expertise that he's going to bring to the conversation today. I know we're going to dive into a lot of POS stuff and a lot of the fun technology that Blaze is kind of pioneering in the space. But more importantly, Brian, how are you doing over there on the East Coast?
Yeah, I'm stoked. And of course, Chris may live on the West Coast, but he's bringing a lot of that education to the East Coast and spending a ton of time out there. And I think, yes, for the record, we got all East Coast, West Coast battle. And I think let's just take it the old traditional way. I think parents kind of where you lay your roots. So Chris, like your dad particular, little East Coast, West Coast, like where would he be from?
Yeah, I know. There you go. And by the way, my father is a general counsel at our company and a co-founder. So he's very much involved, very much part of Blaze.
Awesome.
Let the record reflect.
Yeah, but born in upstate New York in Rochester, lived there for quite some time. My mom was born in New Jersey, so all East Coast folks that found themselves on the West Coast. But to your point, Ryan, I spent a lot of time in New York. Couldn't be more excited about the rollout there and just all the different things happening in the East Coast right now. So lots of good things.
I love it. We wrangled them all the way to the East Coast. So Chris, for our listeners, unfamiliar with that, can you give a background on yourself and kind of how you found your way to the cannabis space?
Yeah, absolutely. So a little bit of, I guess I'll take it back to college because that's really where it started for me. I was a D1 athlete, soccer player at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. Loved it. I was a goalkeeper. Thought I was going to be pro with my life. And I didn't touch cannabis once, like literally going into college. And so junior year comes, I break my right wrist twice. And so I'm, as a goalkeeper, I just kind of stood on the sideline all year and came home during winter break and said, "Hey, Dad, I want to go with you to work." And my dad was a cannabis attorney and very fascinating, been around since 2005. And I was like, I want to see what you're doing. And this is circa 2010, 2011 at this point. And so he took me to Long Beach. We went through all the cultivation facilities, the dispensaries. And I'm like, I need to get into this. This is crazy. And so I wrote a business plan for my father and we launched a dispensary going into my senior year at college. And it was a delivery service out of San Luis Obispo. Scaled that thing up and realized really quickly within a year that I did not want to do this. And I really wanted to build software to solve this problem. So I was lucky. I got an exit out of that a year later and started my journey on the technology side, which is what I went to school for. And so I worked for a really cool ad tech agency. My biggest project there was rolling out the Samsung HQ in New York City. If you guys ever been there, it's across the street from the Highline Standard Hotel. Fully digital experience, and our team did all the work on that. It's rotated a couple times, all the different experiences, but did a lot of work with technology, meeting retail enablement, kind of seeing that come through. And then after that, I went over to Amazon Web Services. So I was sold the cloud for about 4 years, loved it, worked with some really great clients, learned how to scale certain applications and workloads out in the cloud. And during the time I was at Amazon, I started building Blaze. And so put some funds into it from the dispensary sale that I mentioned, and finally got this thing off the ground in 2018, getting some beta customers on. And in April of 2019, I finally left Amazon and went to Blaze full time. So background is cannabis operator and technologist kind of come together.
I love it. And I can see kind of the origin of the path here, which makes it really clear. So let's talk about like those first days, right? You have the idea of Blaze. You want to get started. What is the first thing you do in order to, let's say, take the idea to actually start building the physical product?
Yeah, you got to find developers. So I was very fortunate. I was very close with my boss at the ad tech company I was talking about, and he ran the engineering team, had about 40 on his team. His name's Mon. He's actually co-founder at Blaze today. I convinced him to come over and work for us. So that was like day one, or I said day zero task actually, is finding the talent right in the team. So really fortunate to find Mon, and he really started building out the team. So I went into my work, which is basically designing some of the business flows, logic flows, things of that nature. So I was it's very much us ripping back and forth on how this was going to look, what was this going to look like, and then basically getting hands on keyboard to get that deployed. But, definitely a challenge. And I can't tell you how many times we've changed the system since then. But definitely was, traditional startup path, get to MVP, make sure this works on the critical functions. And at that point, we were solving for California and the recreational market there. So we happen to have a great knowledge set of what that was. So we were able to build against that. And to circle back to my father, he wrote the regulations for the city of Long Beach, or was a principal author in their rec regulations back in 2018. And if you know California, which sounds like not that familiar, but a lot of the municipalities adopted that framework. So we were just so familiar with all the intimate pieces of compliance and how the operations were going to function. And so we built against those quickly. That's kind of how we got started. And obviously my father had a client base. We said, hey, let's use Blaze for those clients. And so we kind of got our feet wet with that and then started to build. And next, we raised some money, hired a team, and started growing the system.
At what point did you leave AWS and take Blaze on full time? Was this like, it was conceptual and then you're like, okay, I'm just going to take the risk? Like when in this journey did you make that decision? We
launched our first beta customer in April or March of 2018. So I was still AWS rocking. So I wanted to make sure this stuff was working, right? And then clear that it was. And then at that point, we saw some big raises from a couple of folks, right? Meadow was coming in back in the day. They were a little earlier, but starting to get some raise momentum. Fundraising would start to happen through Green Bits. And so we were like, oh, we got to play with the big boys. And so we finally went out to the market in Q4 and found our venture capital partner, Act One Ventures, who's a phenomenal, great partner, non-cannabis VC, technology VC, and got that check and finally got to leave and start building the team out. I think when I left in April 2018, we were like 5 people on the team. So we're about 85 now.
It's such a different experience, right? Like building that product internally, and then when you put it in the hands of a beta customer for the first time and you start to see failure points, feedback, it's kind of like a weird dynamic that only someone who's actually experienced that can kind of see that iteration. So like that first interaction with the beta customer, was it as you intended? Were there surprises? Take us through that entire experience.
Yeah, look, I was really familiar with the operations, right? I had ran a delivery service, so really I understood that piece really, really well. And if you think about a storefront, it's a little bit less complex, actually, than some of the delivery mechanics that need to be there. I wasn't necessarily surprised. What I was surprised by was at least early on, was kind of the shoot by the hip mentality. Like there wasn't a bunch of planning going on. And it was like, people were trying to solve for regulations they didn't quite understand properly. So like different tax schemes we saw all over the place. And then metrics started to roll out and no one knew what that was. So look, I think part of our success has been on our ability to, myself, my father, but a lot of our teammates have the domain knowledge here. So we are former operators in many capacities, whether it be through brands, other technology providers. So you can't buy in totally to what the customer feedback loop is giving you. You have to understand it, interpret it, and also rely on your judgment in this space. So the feedback loop is critical for Blaze. We'll talk about that, I'm sure, as we get going. But taking that and really distilling it down to what are the core functions and understand how to scale those out has kind of been, I think, a recipe for our success here. And has continued to kind of proven through the various acquisitions we've done through Greenline in Canada and then Timber down here in the US, taking the same methodologies and same frameworks.
And another element I want to highlight, though, is your infrastructure background. I think that's such a critical component that goes into building of like the house from a stability standpoint that can't be understated.
Yeah, I mean, look, I saw you've got a few folks that I recognize on the podcast recently. And like, look, I think it's very rare when you get to infrastructure, there's various ways to look at it. But when we talk mission critical infrastructure, like our system, like it's not okay just to have a lag. We have someone in front of the point of sale, like literally pushing buttons and wanting to check out. And so there's just no space for issues. And if you do, you need to understand what to do and how to fail over and move through those. So we've spent a lot of time on this. And yes, a lot of my background has come through here, but certainly our engineering team is world-class. And I mentioned Mon really leads that organization extremely well. But it's some of the basic things that people don't think about, right? And a classic example is, hey, we've got our production database, transactions are flying in and out, right? And we're talking, we process a couple $100 million a month. So lots of transactions flowing in and out. However, you don't want reporting to read from that database. That's too much pressure on that thing. So we quickly, from day one, put an ETL together, put it in a data warehouse, reporting sits on the data warehouse. So it doesn't, when people run the 2-year reports that are just crunching through the system and memory that does not affect any of the data or production side of the processing. So there's like classic things like that we knew from day one, where I think some people learn the hard way. But certainly it's a different beast when you talk about mission critical and just being, it's got to be up, right? 100% uptime.
Yeah, because any failure points or any challenges there just make such an uncomfortable experience for like the consumer and for the employee, and then kind of comes back to like, hey, what's the problem here?
Exactly. And then when something does happen, right? Let's talk about that. Like, what's the response? Our response needs to be like literally like you're calling the freaking fire department. Like, we need to be that fast in response. And so I talked about support, prior to the call. It's something I want to discuss a little bit, but it's critical, right? And it's not just support from the support line answer. It's, are they connected to the engineering team and really dissecting what the hell is happening here? So yeah, it's important. It's, I take a lot of pride in it because I view every customer shop as my shop. Realistically, I feel the impact if we do have an impact on the business. Like, it's our responsibility to step in and make sure we help run that business smoothly. That's why they're paying us, and that's why they've given us that trust. And it's a trust you need to earn for sure.
Yeah, because the PLS system is supposed to essentially be like a tool that helps alleviate a lot of like the nuances of running their business, right? And so if it causes more issues, then it can be a very big challenge for these companies. And like managing that trust has got to be a big challenge, right? So like if there is ever any downtime, like that support, like you said, has to be a fire line so that they can instantly get back up to take in more sales.
Yeah. And I think, totally point well said there. And I would just say, it's one thing to have the stability, but what that allows us to do, really, it's an opportunity cost question, right? We don't spend a ton of time because we've invested so much time already in the stability piece that now we're innovating, and that's where we're starting to really get the exciting stuff. And we can talk about all the new things we're doing, but we are iterating. I think we're outpacing our innovation compared to our competitors like pretty easily. And so I'm excited because that's value coming back to the retailer, right? It's going to help their business grow, and that's what we're here to do. We're not here to hamper it or get in the way of it. We're here to help really grow it. And to your point, Kaylin, like, this should be a back of the mind. Like, I don't think about it. It just works.
How do you balance like deployment of those new innovations with ensuring the stability, right? Because like, yes, of course, with new things and new features, there's going to be breakage, and you can only do so much testing locally. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Look, I'd say it comes down to our world-class engineering team. Like, it's unit testing. We went from day one, maybe not day one, but when we acquired Greenline, call it June of 22, with them, we brought some really great teammates in, right? And I'll call out Peter's our VP of engineering here at Blaze, standards, right? Making sure day one, like, we're building so we can scale, right? And so making sure unit tests are done, right? QA's got clear understanding of what the system needs to do. Product managers have visions over that, right? It's all these things working together, and then also adding additional processes of, like, we're SOC 1, SOC 2 certified, right? In both type 1, type 2. That means we've got certain policies in place to prevent all this stuff. So the person that writes the code isn't the one deploying the code or testing the code, things of that nature, right? But yeah, it's something where we've learned the hard way. We've released stuff product-wise that was completely ready technically, but the workflow wasn't quite dialed in. So our account managers are getting pissed at us saying, hey, like, what'd you do? We didn't have any input. So now we've got clear input from them before anything even gets into beta. They're highly involved in our process because they understand the day-to-day of these customers, right? And what they're doing. And each customer has different users, right? We've got the purchasing team, or inventory team, we've got the sales floor lead, like, there's different users all over the place. And so it's really hard to get those personas in without including everyone that engages with those folks. And so we've done a good job, I think, pulling those guys in recently, making sure we go through our own QA, we use it. Like, I run transactions on my POS like all day long here. I play with it all the time. And so if you don't use your product, especially as an executive, I think you lose connection quickly into what's the reality on the ground. And so we've done a lot of work to make sure that feedback loop is tight and is engaging not just a few stakeholders, but anyone that touches that customer in any capacity.
The reason I wanted to highlight your background so importantly is because if you don't build the core infrastructure the right way, and you kind of build it on, let's call it like half sticks, as you stack it up and you try to scale these things and bring in new acquisitions, it just kind of crumbles in on itself on opportunities where you don't see. So that's why those aspects are so critical to get right from the beginning.
100%. And again, now we can focus on fun stuff, which is building new innovations in tech, which is, especially at the retail level, is quite fun. And when we start to get these things really tied up, and we talk about the connection from e-commerce into the point of sale and how tight that is, like, we really start to really fly like revolutions around some competitors, right? We can really supercharge our retailers. And we've seen these case studies of that. We were talking about New York. Take a look at Happy Monkey. Shout out to Vlad and Ramon. We just launched their second location here or in New York, and they're full bought in on this strategy. I mean, they're using all pieces of our technology to really attack the consumers from a technology perspective, not so much piecing all these different things together and trying to manage how they all work. And no, they went all in with our strategy, and we're starting to see some great results from them. So I'm really excited about the ecosystem getting tighter so that our customers can go faster, right? And again, this is the fun stuff we get to do.
Can you give just our listeners an overall kind of like a high level perspective of the ecosystem?
Yeah. So for those that are not familiar with Blaze, we do a lot. Think of all things commerce. We're a dispensary tool set. We provide the point of sale infrastructure. So what does that mean? We provide all the register or all the technology on the registers, the back of house, the business intelligence reporting. If you do delivery, all the dispatch functionality within there. Then as you look to e-commerce and how the consumer interacts with the brand outside the point of sale, we provide e-commerce. So we can provide, a great shopping experience. We have a mobile app as well, white labeled mobile app that's really effective. Our kiosk in store we support. And then outside of that, we have our payments. And so we're providing payment support. In the US, we do cash ATM and ACH for online orders, and we spend a lot of time making sure that's really effective and clean. And then in Canada this year, we launched our own PayFac business to handle credit cards in Canada. So we are Blaze Pay Canada up there, and that's full credit card support, debit card support, you name it. But we have the whole kind of ecosystem of tech right now that I think you see a lot of providers have kind of one or two pieces of that, but it's hard to do all at once. And we knew that growing up and growing this business. And so that's why we went on to acquisition mode and looking for the best class technology. Like that's what we want. Less of the all-in-one, but best in class in that particular category. And if we can stitch that together and really make sure that the connective tissue is there, I mean, it's going to be hard to catch us. It's going to be really tough.
Take us through the process of connecting those two platforms, right? Like internally, you have a platform, it works really well, your customers enjoy it, they're asking for other help, you want to expand the value, you see a technology, and then the integration process, like one is negotiating for a price, two is like the technical integration, correct?
Yeah. This is what I would say we're pretty damn good at. Not a lot of successful acquisitions in the technology space in cannabis. They've been done, but you'll check in a year later and those products are out the door. They didn't happen. Things went bad. So I would say this is a bit of our specialty, and the post-merger acquisition process is critical, right? Specific to the tech, we talk about infrastructure, right? And hopefully I don't get too technical here, but
go as far as you want.
In. So there's certain domains that are just critical to our world, right? Think of inventory as a critical pillar. There's products in there, and then there's inventory actions, right? If you think about all the ecosystem, all the products that we could or would add on to this, they need to know products. And so building microservices around these critical pillars, and we ultimately get them to what's called the global service, is massive, right? And so as we bring acquisitions in, once they build and they work towards that integration at the product level, after that, we're all speaking the same language and we can really start to move and create that connective tissue. Like with e-commerce, we launched our deals pages. So you can go build a promotion or discount in Blaze, the point of sale, and it shows up on e-com and you can do whatever you want there. You can choose not to do that as well. And we launched things like sales channels recently. So if you want to do a discount, maybe you get 5% off offline or on e-commerce, like online for a user, but maybe 15% off on e-commerce. You can actually choose what channel gets what discount, but all of it's around finding those critical like main areas. Again, inventory, sales, consumers are kind of the critical pillars, and then outside that, you can kind of work on that. But making sure those pieces of infrastructure are really solid and are somewhat malleable, and that each provider that we do bring in as an acquisition can tap into those things. So we're all speaking the same language, and we're not managing different databases and things of that nature.
Do adjustments in that kind of aspect involve like, all right, we want to make a change on the e-commerce side, so that needs to connect to the inventory side, or is it like one step at a time? Then we need to go and say, okay, we did this here, but it'd be really nice on the inventory side if we could see this also.
I don't know. It depends on the product, right? It depends on what we're trying to do, frankly. And so rewards is an interesting one now, where it's like, well, okay, the point of sale's got a different reward system in Canada than the US. Like, how are we going to think about this? We want to build it once. We want to let each one do it individually. And oftentimes we find ourselves saying, okay, we're going to build a microservice for this. This is a new critical pillar. And so we start to rebuild certain things around that. So it depends on what it is, frankly, and evaluating each piece individually. And it goes back to that famous, do we build it or do we buy it? What makes sense, right?
You guys have like a specific team that helps with like the post-merger integration, or is it like, because like each team or each like pillar that it's being integrated with has their own specific team,
Yeah.
right? And so you kind of serve as like the guiding hand that's like, hey guys, we should all hang out. This is matchmaker, maybe is a good word for it, right?
Being a recent dad, I will say, like, doing acquisitions, like having another kid, it's a lot of work. Like, it's a lot of work, and you're kind of teaching them how to walk. You're kind of teaching them how to talk, and trying to do this all at the same time as saying, hey, run your business. You got a day job. But yeah, it needs dedicated people on this to really help make sure it goes smooth. And I got some really good advice from former CEO of Weedmaps, Chris Violas, on this, and working with acquisitions. But like, one thing that stuck with me and speaking with a lot of different advisors, if you have to get comms and critical like information systems like migrated within the first month. So meaning if we use HubSpot for CRM, they got to be on our HubSpot at the end of the first month. Slack needs to be open day 2. If you can't have communication, you can't make this work, right? And so getting them into the communication areas like immediately has been our first piece. Like, we do just rip the Band-Aid off right then, give them new emails, things of that nature. And then from there, you start to really assess the technical build and like, okay, what are we going to do now? But culture and communication have to be first. They have to be done first. Plain and simple. Because if our culture doesn't come through, then you can easily have that incoming company kind of override your culture, and then you've got culture wars within. And so it's a lot about managing the people, right, and how they think about the company, the combined org, and all those things. But yeah, I spent a lot of time on that piece.
These are the really challenging behind the scenes aspects. I think sometimes people don't realize, right? They see the fancy headline from a PR newswire, they say this acquisition, and then they just assume it's just like, hey, just plug and play the pieces. How hard could it be? It's software.
It's hard, and I will say I'm super proud. Like, we acquired Greenline, which is the Canadian point of sale, a number 2 player in the space up there, about 33% market share. We bought them they had 500 doors. We're well over 1,000 now. So we've doubled that company, which is unheard of on these kind of acquisitions. Same thing with Timber. We bought them. They had about 200 doors roughly. We were over 500 now. And so like, we've done a really good job of getting them in, making sure everyone's taken care of, and then also growing the business subsequently, which is just, again, it's kind of a weird talent to have, but we happen to have a nag for it. So yeah, we like it. We're going to keep doing it where it makes sense and keep building where it makes sense.
And the best part about the ecosystem model, though, is that a customer comes in, he's using your flagship product, and then looks to expand elsewhere, and it already works so naturally with all the other products that they're getting all these other massive benefits. But again, like, if there's not that software value that in order to connect those things the way you've described, the customer then feels like, hey, like, this should work like this, and then it's not delivering what you're talking about.
Look, and there's no, by all means, we're not perfect on it. Like, we've done a good job, I will say, but like, that's some of the feedback we get. It's like, oh, I didn't expect that to all of a sudden work over there. And it's like, yeah, we spent a lot of time thinking about that stuff. And so it's good when you get those moments. And then also when you see other people try to pull off moves like this, you're like, oh, it doesn't do that, does it? And you can figure it out real quick what's going on.
What about like unique cannabis challenges? Is it state by state variation? Is there anything like that kind of affects your business?
Yeah, I mean, definitely the U.S. is the most challenging when it comes to cannabis for a number of reasons. We can talk payments, we can talk compliance. Canada's relatively straightforward, to be honest, which is nice. So I'll bifurcate the countries there. But as it comes to the U.S., so many challenges. I mean, payments continue to be top of mind, right? Like, really difficult in the banking space. Visa, MasterCard just don't want anything to do with our space, which is cool, but their logo is on every piece of plastic out there, including debit cards, right? So that becomes challenging. The compliance area, I mean, look, you guys tracking the New York BioTrack thing? Like, this has been a very interesting rollout. Compliance continues to move, both on the technology front and the regulatory front. And so keeping up with those are challenging, right? You start to see states like Washington break off and do their own thing. Now we've got, Utah not aligning to a metric or a BioTrack. And so that now means we have to integrate with whatever that is. And some of these are custom built. So it is a big part. It's a big department within our team to keep up with the compliance areas, but it's not unmanageable. It's just, it's a lot, right? And so wherever we can get some wins out of it, we love it. We just launched our support for metrics retail ID this week. And look, dude, if we can save people a person labeling products on intake, that's a $60,000, $70,000 person. Like, that's a win. And that's effectively what this does here. So yeah, there's a lot of moving pieces. It's hard to innovate in compliance, but I would say the challenges really are just other states not learning from each other and seeing repetitive mistakes on rollouts of these compliance systems. Like, that is the biggest headache I have. We should have learned from California and just launch. Well, it learns, and not that they did it the right way, learns what they did wrong. It was pretty clear to me, and do it right. Like, it's just, and even like all these different states as they roll out their compliance systems are just, it's very interesting because we get the call like, hey, you got to be BioTrack ready in New York by the 17th or 15th of January. Cool. What does that mean? Do I have to tag all my inventory? Does it just start at the grower? Like what happens? We've got units that are selling in and out all day long, right? Purchase orders being received. So that's my biggest frustration and challenge is just the lack of communication and kind of the mess of the rollouts that we see there.
Two things, right? Every state is their unique, perfect chaos, right? Because they're like, oh, we would never make those mistakes. We're just going to make all of our own. Second, when they told you that, they're like, Chris, you know exactly what that means. You've done this for 8 years. Like, just figure it out. And you're like, this is chaos.
Yeah. But look, I think part of the strategy behind the Greenline acquisition in Canada was to kind of get the quiet space. So like, hey, let's focus on enterprises at scale. Like if we had the perfect world, what would we do? How would we build this system, right? And so that's what we're doing in Canada. Like we've got a perfect world of just, we can do payments, we can do all these things we want to do. We can have customers that can reach 100 stores, right? Really tough to do unless you're GTI in this space or something like that in the US. So we've been learning a lot. And the hope is once we get some loosened up regulations, like all those learnings are ready to be brought down to the US like immediately. So pretty that's been kind of a fun way we've looked to kind of overcome those challenges and look around the corner necessarily, but it's fraught with challenges, whether it be compliance or payments. I mean, you name it, we just try to find our way through and make sure we're protecting our customers as best as we can.
What would be some of the benefits that like an enterprise level solution would provide some of these operators in the States if they were at that level?
Yeah, so if you're getting that big, right, things change. You're typically buying, if you looked at some of these acquisitions that these MSOs have made, they tend to leave the brand with the retail. So you've got like 4, let's say you're 50 stores wide or 60 stores wide or something of that nature. You may have 4 or 5 different retail brands. Okay. One system can't handle that all right now. You have to literally separate systems to handle each one. So how do you scale that properly, right? Because pricing is going to be different. Loyalty structure is going to be different. All the actual like pieces, the day-to-day pieces and how that dispensary flows are different. So things that we're building in Canada right now are like, hey, well, maybe we should put it all in one system. Maybe we can have pricing by banner, by logo, right? And we start to manage by logo and by banner that way, rather than we're trying to force people all in one. So there's different management pieces that come out, like just day-to-day information system management that we're thinking about that are just very different than what we're seeing in the US. So that's just one example, but that you can imagine that just continues to kind of like scale as you bring more brands in, and it just gets more complicated per state as well.
I think it's funny because when you describe kind of like the current method of scaling, like one system at a time at each dispensary, it reminds me of how kind of some of the early grows were scaled. You know what I mean? They're just like, oh, I'll build 2 more rooms. I've doubled my capacity. You know what I mean? Like this is scaling, right? So like,
really similar. Really similar. So those are just challenges that I think, these MSO operators they're doing it today, just the pure like manpower, right? They're just making it work. Is that the best use of their capital and resources and time? No, they could probably move so much faster if they could put it all in one system, right? And manage it at a more global scale. So those are things that we're thinking about that are, I think, exciting and just different challenges, right? With the kind of scale that we can get in Canada.
Do those conversations with some of the MSOs, some of the bigger players come to you and say, hey, Chris, like, can we start building or prepping for this type of like consolidation aspect?
I will say, I mean, like a lot of the MSOs are just scared to do anything right now. Like, no, the answer is they need help in so many different areas. A lot of the balance sheet issues and just carrying too much inventory and not understanding how to buy properly and all those things. But generally, like when we go to talk to MSOs, we're like, we can't touch anything right now. We can have zero disruption. There's this misconception and this fear of migrating and talking. Like it's really interesting, but it's really similar to how people like we're moving to AWS back in the day when people were on data centers, right, and starting to move to the cloud. It's a really similar shift and very similar kind of like hesitancy and just understanding who the players are. We do hear, like I was at Benzinga, Chicago, and had some really good conversations again around more the inventory side of the house. Like how do I empower my buying team to do better and not carry so much product, right? Things of that nature we're talking to them about. But it's hard to get these folks to discuss their problems out loud, especially if you're not their core provider, right? Like we're trying to build trust with them and get them to open up, and it's been challenging, I will say that. So we're open, by the way. Come talk to me.
How do you manage like your guys' solution kind of ends at a certain place and they might want further requests, right? Like it's not a complete ERP like software solution where they're looking to like you just described, managing your inventory levels would typically be done with like your traditional ERP. And you guys have a lot of like the pieces they're looking to correlate, but like that's not, you know what I mean? They're like, I know it's a square block and it's a round hole, but like, could you try to say on the corners?
How about a triangle?
Yeah, exactly. No, I love that analogy. Yeah, I mean, look, there's definitely a point where we're excellent at and where we stop, right? And so that's where we've got a ton of APIs you can have access to, and we use the same APIs internally. So we just consume our own stuff and we allow you to do that. So if you have a procurement team that has a certain algorithm that they want to run by, you know, they've got maybe 15-day carry or whatever, they can literally have their algorithm set up and that can just hit our API and trigger a purchase order per store. That can happen today, right now. At the same time, like we're launching our partnership with Sage Intact next week, which is a big ERP. So we understand they need these things. Let's make sure that the data from retail can get consolidated and put in there quickly. So you're not spending tons of time just trying to get data entry, frankly, and bookkeeping basics done. So it's understanding where we kind of stop and end. And, you know, if we can't build this or it's not a core focus of ours, like giving them the ability to interact with, again, this critical systems like inventory, the consumers, right? And the things we discussed earlier.
That is such a hard balance, just given the nature of the industry, the chaos it is, and the opportunities that exist with like the right partners to be able to find like, hey, this is a really hard intersection, but if we can do this and figure this out, like we will be a juggernaut for our competitors.
I totally agree. Yeah. And look, I think we stay so focused on what we're trying to do. Like, yeah, we're aware of what's going on in the competition, but generally speaking, I mean, I spend so much time speaking with our customers and just, I think we're setting a different path than what's out there. And I think you're going to see that really come to light in 2025, which I'm incredibly excited about. So, yeah, I'm excited. You're going to see us really start to get ahead for all these reasons we've started to discuss.
So let's slightly switch gears, right? Like obviously there's good things that happen, but unfortunately sometimes people use the system, bad things happen, and then support needs to be called on. Can you talk a little bit about like the support procedures that you put in place and some of the ways you've seen that kind of work for some of the partners?
Yeah, absolutely. I think looking at our competition, we overinvest in support. Like it's a big deal. We don't outsource. Everything is done either stateside or our team in Canada supports our Canadian team. And so we kind of break it up into 3 areas of success. We've got our onboarding team, our account management team, and then our tier 1 team that's handling tickets that come in and phone calls. Our average tenure on that team is about 3.5 years. So one, we've really helped grow our employees so they're super knowledgeable when things come in. They don't need the context. Like they got it, they understand what's going on. And a lot of them are former operators. And so that's another thing that you can call them. They understand what metric is. They understand what weed maps is and who to contact over there. I will just say, I think our team goes above and beyond to make sure we get resolution. Looking at the CSAT score this year, we're at 99.1 average. There's many months, I think about 6 months this year, we've had 100% CSAT score.
What does that acronym mean?
Customer satisfaction survey, essentially. And so these are customers that once they get support, they they have to click on a button, fill something out, and submit it to us. Over 10% of our tickets have a response, and that response is usually, again, 10 out of 10. So I'm really excited about that. We've done a great job scaling that organization out. Shout out to David Hines. He's our customer success director over both the US and Canada. But I just think it's so critical that we have to pick up the phone. We have to care, right? Like we really do have to care. And I think you'll see that and feel that through our interactions with our support team, our sales team. I mean, pretty much the entire org. That's just a critical piece. So we spend a lot of time and money on it. We kind of have a lot of resources in that area, but it's making sure when we do support, it's thinking about all the different personas we've got, right? How does this affect the person before launch, during launch, once they're open, if they've been with us for 2 years, right? In the various phases they're at. And so we spend a lot of time on documentation, context. Again, I mentioned us pulling in our account managers into development and product talks, like same thing with support. As you scale, you shouldn't hire more support people. Like you should find the areas of concern and then address that with technology as our basic kind of path. So once we do see something start to pop up, that becomes a critical priority on the technology side that we do solve. So
can you give an example of something like that?
Sure. Good example. Let's see. When we were rolling out some of the metric stuff, sometimes we get failed submissions, right? Sometimes we get tickets in and our guys would have to go in and start to look at our logs in the back end, did it go or not? So we solved that by providing an interface called the compliant issue page. And so all the issues show up there. It's all the logs our support team would see, and it gives the tools back to the customer to go solve that problem. So we get less tickets in now, less calls, right? So that's a good one we launched early in 23. That's been huge. Our tickets have actually gone down over time, which is pretty cool because our customer count has gone up. So something that we look at for sure.
Yeah, that's a really important metric. And I think it's really smart to be building in more technology assets to give the power back to the operator, because ultimately when there's a problem, they really don't want to contact you. They want to alleviate the problem, and whatever the easiest way to do that is what they're looking for.
100%. So yeah, sport's huge. And I can't tell you, like, out of all the migrations we do from other systems, that's probably the number one issue that is cited. Yes, of course, there's certain workflow problems and things like that, but generally that is the issue. So
what about some data? You got any fun data trends or any sort of habits that you can share that you found really interesting or surprising?
Yeah, I was just did a webinar with Andrew from Happy Cabbage on some of this stuff. I think one of the most interesting data points that going to leave this podcast, I guess, with anything, is probably something you should know. Like 1 to 2% of customers, and this is for the average dispensary, drive 15 to 20% of your revenue. Think about that. That's a lot, right? So it kind of goes like this and then off a cliff in terms of contribution to revenue. And it's been consistent. We look at the US, we look at Canada, it's very consistent across the space. And so part of the webinar I just did with Andrew was, how do we get that from 1 to 2% to like 3 to 4%? Because if we can do that, we're going to obviously drive our revenue up and in a meaningful way, not just like, bips, essentially. So that's something that we talked a lot about. That data point right there, I think, is just very interesting. Andrew had some really interesting data as well. When you look at, how many average days, what's the average carry? And, it's like 45 days. It's like actually a long time. So I would refer back to that podcast. But he pointed out a lot of different inventory problems that folks are getting themselves into on the balance sheet as well.
Isn't that like a similar metric for like Coca-Cola and like the alcohol industry too? That like there's like a small percentage of the consumers that drive like a majority of the actual revenue as well.
It's pretty consistent on retail. Now that changes when dollar amounts go up, right? And what you're buying goes up. But yeah, generally speaking, it should be actually really similar in alcohol. I haven't done a ton of work in that space. I don't have any like perfect data to cite, but I would imagine it's going to be really similar because AOV is probably about the same, right? We're probably $70 to $100 AOV roughly. So not $40, not $30, but a little higher than that. And once people like what they like, I mean, they get going on it, right? So and they come back.
I know we only quickly touched on the metric alignment with the retail ID. Can you just quickly share how that works so people who might not be aware can hear the information?
Yeah, absolutely. So if folks aren't familiar with metric retail ID, the concept is running off of this concept of serialization, right? So every unit is individually tagged. So if I'm a manufacturer and I make 10,000 pre-rolls, let's call it, or vape carts or whatever, in my manufacturing lot, each one will have its own unique ID. What this does is it allows manufacturing to do the labeling so that as it comes through the supply chain and it hits retail, we can leverage the same damn labels. Really, it's actually that simple. There's some other wins in it, but effectively, as you're a retailer and you're using our system and you work with a distributor or manufacturer that's on retail ID, you basically scan in the products as you receive them. So it's really straightforward. You don't even have to scan in the products. You basically hit receive. You should physically count those products to make sure they're it. But that QR code or that label works all throughout our system. So as you're doing transfers or you're doing inventory audits or you're ringing up at the point of sale, like you use this barcode and it just works everywhere. I should say QR code, excuse me. And so on that QR code, there's a lot of information that metrics put in there. It's effectively a URL is what it is. And if a consumer scans it, it's going to show assets from the brand. So they could put like test results in there because it's just pointing back to a file system effectively. So they could put, marketing assets in there if they wanted to. But it's kind of a win for both the consumer and the dispensary. I was just speaking with one of our larger retailers in California, about 15 doors, someone, pretty good vertical integration. They do about 50, 60% of their products through, or they sell 50, 60% of their own products, which is pretty cool. This is going to save them hundreds of thousands of dollars. Right, both at the manufacturing and also at the retail level. They have, I think, 3 or 4 people just labeling products like full time because they sell so much, right? And the units are flowing through so fast. And given metric and compliance systems, like we do need to know what lot and batch they belong to. And this is a really cool way to kind of give some time savings back to the retailer as well as some cash flow, frankly. So that's in a nutshell what it is. There's some other benefits of it, but that's the way I like to describe it.
Is it similar to like how there's a barcode on like produce, right? But if I go to like my Kroger or any other normal grocery store, they have the same barcode, right? It's like a similar system that's implemented in other consumer pack. Is that like, you know what I mean, right? They don't put me like Safeway doesn't have its own.
I would say that's an oversimplification. I would say that's an oversimplification. That is generally like a SKU barcode, which is common There's a GS1, which can maintain these SKUs at scale, and you buy these specific SKUs. This is more, again, while there is inherently a SKU in it, it's really just getting down to the lot level. What manufacturing batch did this thing come from? I think produce has something to that effect, but nothing that would be on those types of barcodes that you're
That level. Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
I think the key takeaways for me was like the saving the time, the money, right? Like those are massive
big,
wins.
and like not just small money. I'm talking like you can probably get rid of a couple people in your business and like get that back into the bottom line, which is obviously for retailers today, just any operator is critical. So
right, especially from like a simple step of just like labeling, right? Like you're talking about like adjusting the process and improving from an efficiency standpoint. So
it's a lot. I mean, it is a lot. When we imagine we were doing the Hall Flower Show for Ventura back in March of this year. We had to label all those products as they came in for the show. It was a lot. And I just, because we were involved and our team was assisting the dispensary record there, which was Wheelhouse, and shout out to them, great customer of ours down in Ventura. I mean, we spent 12 hours labeling all these products as we brought them in. It's time and it's money, right? Time is money. So I'm really excited about that. And we've heard other providers have some pieces of the integration done, but like it works fully across our system. So I'm really excited. You're not going to like miss a beat or a step. Everything that you do today in our system, you're going to continue to do. Just don't have to label.
So one of the areas that I'm really impressed with is some of the work your team does with the Children's Hospital. I'd love for you to share a little bit about that.
Yeah. Yeah. So we talked about payments, that being a challenge, right? And me talking about Canada and kind of looking there to like go get some work done without having, kind of the environment of the US as it pertains to payments. We launched Blaze Pay, which is a full credit card system and payment solution in Canada back in June. And we're going to be announcing our partnership with Sick Kids. So if you're familiar with the Toronto area or Ontario at all, Sick Kids is a beautiful hospital. It's focused on children research. And we wanted to give back where we could. And so during the holiday season and throughout the next year, for retailers that want to opt in with us, they can. We turn on the terminal to say, hey, do you want to round up, $2 or $3? I'm sure you guys have all seen this, at the grocery store. But through our partnership with Sick Kids, it gets routed directly to them. All the paperwork behind the scenes is all done. And it's kind of a win-win. And it's a big deal because Sick Kids, frankly, like their children's hospital, I was surprised and very grateful that they were open to partnering with a technology provider that happens to be in the cannabis space. So I was very grateful for them. And I think we're going to have some meaningful strides. If we can give some money back, Blaze could match some of this and we could really start to make a meaningful difference and kind of bridge that gap, which I'm really excited about. So Blaze Cares is kind of what we'll be launching that under. And we want to do the same thing in the US. And so look out next year. We'll be doing similar activities down here and we'll have to pick some organizations that we want to help out. But like we're here in a position where we can help and we want to make sure that we do what we can.
I love it. I commend you for it. I think that's an amazing initiative, and I think that's so important to try to get back, especially wherever you can. So it's going to be a hard pivot, but we're going to go for it.
Okay.
Dream smoking session, 3 people dead or alive.
Oh, yeah, that is a very hard pivot.
Listen, there was no easy way to go for it. We just had to go.
All right. All 3 at once or just independent, whatever.
Take your time. Yeah.
I would say Snoop. I would love to just smoke a Snoop Dogg. That'd be so rad. I had a chance to smoke with Burner. That was cool. That was probably on the bucket list for me. I would say I would love to smoke with Elon Musk. That would be just so much fun. So I would put him up there as well, just to pick his brain and see what he does when he's goofy. We obviously saw a little shot of that on the Rogan podcast, but I would say those 3 would be really fascinating to smoke with. If I had to sub someone out for Burner, again, I've had a great experience on that. I would say probably Joe Rogan too. I just love that stuff. It's fun. Really diverse topics and get to dive into whatever you want, right? So
what is the most expensive lesson you've ever learned?
Had some big expensive lessons. I would say probably sunk a couple million into something that I probably shouldn't have. So probably a couple million, and really I would say that's around, trying to kind of go the cheap route that ended up being 3x more expensive and hindered us long term. So, I've definitely had some learning lessons there, but I think again, it all comes back into what we're doing today, which is, hey, like hire domain experts in your space. It is absolutely critical when you're doing vertical SaaS stuff. And so that was one of the lessons that painful, expensive in some respects, but we learned pretty damn quickly and have definitely improved since then.
What question do you wish more people asked you?
Oh man. I think I have a lot to say around technology in this space. I wish I got just general more questions around how we can target customers, how we can actually grow the business. I get a lot of folks come to us and it's like not damage control, but like we have like they're off the path early, right? And so I would like to catch them before that happens. And so I think when we talk, when I get questions, like I really like to hear questions around operations and how ops meet the tech and kind of having like leadership alignment along that decision. A lot of people are that are making decisions for technology are not the ones using it. They're not the ones on the ground, and like that creates a ton of problem, right? Because we can't actually service. We can't provide our tool, which is dedicated to these specific roles. Like they don't really benefit if they don't have a say in what they're doing, right? And what the solution is.
Prediction time. Chris, what is the next unlocking for Blaze?
Ooh, we're doing some really interesting stuff around normalizing our data set right now. So I know that's a big topic, but we've got a lot of different products in our system. So to know that, a Camino gummy is Camino gummy across all of our retailers is interesting. And so we believe that to be the next unlock for us and where we're going to go. You can think brand insights. You can think a lot of different things that are going to get gleaned from that. So really excited and pretty bullish on that front is that this whole topic of normalization, specifically for an org like us that has, we got to support everyone, let them have all their different variations of products. But at the end of the day, behind the scenes, we need to know what's what. And so that's a fun unlock that we're doing right now, which I'm really excited about.
I love it. Kellen, you want to take a swing?
I'm glad we talked kind of like some of the new technology that Chris is excited about before we jumped on. I would say the next unlock for them is going to be, I think we talked about the shop to scan feature, right? In one of your San Jose partner stores, right? Where you're
scan and shop.
Walk through the store with your phone. I think that there's going to be a really important kind of transitionary phase for POS and dispensary organizations, right? Companies that are dispensaries, as more e-commerce becomes available to consumers, right? There's going to be a balance of how a traditional dispensary adopts that and maintains like specific customers, right? Like there's a way to maintain that customer when they're shopping online, right? Instead of losing that sale. So I think that is a good segue into capturing that as like a way to keep them in your ecosystem as a dispensary.
Yeah, look, I mean, I spoke to this last week with Andrew. I don't know where this obsession with building out these crazy storefronts and like creating this perfect consumer experience came from. Like, yeah, it's nice to have a storefront, but the reality is it is like 80% more efficient on so many levels to fulfill an online order than to have someone walk around with someone in store and hold their hand. So like just saying, if you look at just the efficiency standpoint of fulfilling an order, that budtender can probably fulfill 40 orders an hour, 30 orders an hour, maybe more than that, where, maybe they're doing a transaction every 5-10 minutes on the floor. Like it's just, it's a no brainer in terms of scale. And so I totally agree. I think the next wave of smart retailers is trying to do kind of what everyone else does. Like look at Starbucks. Do they really want you in their store? No, they don't. Not at all, actually. They want the store as a distribution center for sure, but they don't necessarily want you in there from a cost perspective, right? It's way easier and more effective to fulfill these orders online, provide a more consistent, personalized experience, right? All these things, right, are easier, and the convenience factor is easier. So one of the things I talk to is, hey, understand your channels and push them towards the high retention channels. And if you do that, good things will happen, but you also have to incentivize them to do that, right? So if you're going to say e-com is the way to go, you better have half your parking lot dedicated to online order pickup and you get 30 minutes or less, right? You got to make it valuable to the consumer, but understanding your channels. And I think e-com, you nailed it. That's my preaching point right now is moving people to the e-commerce channel. It's consistent. I spoke to the challenges of payments, like ACH is going to be good. Visa and MasterCard don't touch ACH. We like ACH. Once they get in our system, it's one tap checkout. That's it. And so the experience gets so much better. And again, on the dispensary side, we see AOVs way higher, first off. So we're looking at about $20 gain on AOV when it comes to e-commerce. If you support prepayment, add another $10 on that. So just the numbers make sense. Put them to where they're going to spend more and then put it to where it's more efficient for you to fulfill, right? And ultimately create that better experience rather than spending all this money on budtender training just to have that budtender have a bad day when that big spender comes in, right? And then it's just all screwed. So
I got one more quick question to get in, super quick.
Yeah.
Like Bitcoin and crypto, like is that you guys working on that? Like
Look, interesting.
I know you say ATS. I don't want to
I would love to see something like that. I think the stable coins for sure could play here. I don't know what the adoption is going to be needed to take this, right? Like it's interesting. Part of the issue is loading the wallet sometimes, and so do you use a credit card to do that? And if you do,
you partner with Coinbase, right? And then use them to facilitate.
We want to make it easier for consumers and kind of get closer to like the masses versus like the very small percentage that's crypto based, right? Like you can't have some of these people show up there for the first time, be like, I bought weed like from my dealer for 45 years. I got to use what? I got to use BTC from a Coinbase in order to get my what? My weed?
Look, I'm not saying
it's an extra option.
It's not impossible.
For sure.
But I just would say, like, our goal is to reduce friction at checkout. That might reduce friction at checkout.
Transfer it to Solana, then XRP, then push it all the way to Canada, and then you can send it to Thailand, and then we can do the purchasing.
So, look, I will say we got a payments team. We look at a lot of different things. We haven't looked at this topic at Crypto at least probably for a year. We'll probably come back and take
no reason to right now.
At it, but I just don't know. I mean, like, crypto is interesting in the fact that, like, blockchain's cool. I like ledgers. That's great.
Yeah, totally.
And I think that's overkill for what we're doing in the space. And so, a lot of different topics.
So, Chris, for our listeners, they want to get in touch, they want to learn more, and they want to try Blaze. Where can they find you?
Yeah, look, I'm on LinkedIn. Look, Chris Violas, or look at Blaze. Blaze.me is our website. So pretty straightforward there. Get in touch with us. We got a really flat organization at Blaze. So I see a lot of the contact forms that come in. A lot of the requests come in. I take these calls. I like to speak with folks. So I'll be there always digitally. And then also I'll be at MJ BizCon coming up here, next week, right? So be there for a couple days. And outside of that, that's pretty much the best way to get in contact with me. I do a lot of speaking engagements, a lot of webinars. So if you see me, follow me on LinkedIn, and I'm sure you get a chance to jump on there and interact and see all the content that we're producing here. So
thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Thanks, Con. You guys are awesome and fun discussion today, man.